Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight at KDL's program on canning. Tonight, Christina from Lions and Rabbits will be teaching us about home canning. Lions and Rabbits began in 2016 on a mission to bridge the barriers between art, community, and economic advancements. Currently housing over 120 local visual artists, they function as a gallery, education center, and event space in business. Christina is the founder of My Lovely Muse, an eco-conscious housewares business who's on a mission to save the planet from needless waste. It's designed for earth-minded folks who appreciate a quirky print to make their everyday essentials their own. Go ahead and please type your comments in the chat. Christina will do her best to answer your questions during the presentation, or we'll wait to the end. Christina, thanks for being here, and I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Marie. So, okay. So I'm Christina. I've got a dog out here, so don't mind him. He's a little bit noisy, but hopefully he'll stop barking at his friends in a little bit. So anyway, I do own a business. I sell eco-conscious housewares, but I have canned my whole life. I watched my grandparents can, my mom canned when I was younger, so here I am canning for my own family. This summer I canned tomatoes, jam, beans, dilly beans, pickles, peppers, black beans, garbanzo beans, all sorts of beans and tomatoes and vegetable broth and anything I can get my hands on and preserve, that's what I do. So here I am to show you guys how I can applesauce, or just maybe a little canning 101, just to introduce you to canning, because especially in the middle of the pandemic this year, we're wanting to provide more for ourselves and preserve more food for ourselves. I mean, if you're trying to go to the store and buy any canning supplies, a lot of times they're sold out, or the prices have really gone up big time. So there's a lot of people out there that are working on preserving food for their families on their own at home. So a couple tips that I have ahead of time. Actually, let's just start off right off the bat talking about different jars for canning. I don't think that I can see, I'm on my phone this time, so I don't think I can see a chat on the side like I could in June when I did the other, the herb class. So keep sending your questions in and maybe they'll pop up somewhere. So let me lower this and we'll start off with, so we've got a half-gallon jar right here. This is what I can most of my kombucha in. So I'm not canning my kombucha, but when I ferment it and store it, this is what I'm storing it in. Ooh, I don't have a quart-sized jar. That's the next up. Oh, I have it over here. So here's a quart-sized jar. And then wide mouth. This is a wide mouth quart-sized jar. Here's a wide mouth pint. Regular mouth pint. 12-ounce regular mouth. And then here's a half pint jelly jar. So these are just some of the options. There's a lot more. There's a 4-ounce jar that's good for jams, and I actually store a lot of spices in them. And then I think there's a half pint that looks like this too. And then some other fancier 6-ounce jars. So there's a wide range of jars. I also freeze using these jars. So I think only certain ones are recommended. You'll have to check the box that the jars come in to see if they're recommended for freezer. But For applesauce, I usually use the pint size, and then sometimes I'll use the quart size just because we go through a lot of applesauce. So that's what we'll probably be using, the pint size today. And I actually just use the regular mouth, the wide mouth. I use more for beans, tomatoes, some bigger kind of fruits and vegetables that just go inside there. A whole lot easier. So back up to me. That goes for lids. You'll want a 2-system lid. So here we have the lids, and then you have the bands that go with the lid. So here's a band that goes with this lid. These are meant to be used once. There's a little bit of rubber on the opposite side that will seal to your jar when heat is added. So when we put it in the water bath canner. So that's a little introduction on jars and lids. I like to buy, I always, whenever there's an opportunity to buy jars, I usually get them on Facebook Marketplace whenever they pop up. So I'm always stocked up on jars. I'll buy my lids at the end of a season. So at the end of last season, I stocked up on lids, which was fantastic because you couldn't find any this year. It was really difficult to. So I had all of the lids that I needed. I always stock up the year before because it kind of happens every year towards the middle of summer. Everyone's canning, so all of the lids are often really low stock or totally out of stock. So I've ended up, over the years, I've realized it's a better idea to just stock up on them the season before. So let's start with, I have some apples that I've already started turning into applesauce. So I picked my apples on Friday. I have my favorite, I keep a canning journal. So every year I write down where I buy my fruits and vegetables from, if I buy them from someone else instead of growing them on my own. And I write in my journal where they're from so that I can remember to go back the next year. I keep prices and how much I can each year in that journal so that I have a rough estimate of how much I have to pick the following year. So I still had some applesauce left this year from last year. Last year I think I picked 3 bushels of apples, and this year I just picked 2 because I still had some left. Past years I've made apple butter so that I could make apple cider donuts, but most of the time I just make applesauce. I also make, last year was the first year I did a little bit more with my scraps. So as Marie said earlier, I have I sell eco-conscious housewares, but my business is also zero waste production. So everything that I use, I don't produce any waste from anything used in my business. And I kind of, all of that started really in my house. So I like to carry that throughout my own house. So with the apple scraps, I save the scraps, and the cores I will run through a juicer to make apple juice. And the apple peels I save to make apple cider vinegar. So I'll can the apple juice, and the apple cider vinegar just ferments in my pantry. I don't really need to pay much attention to that, but free apple cider vinegar, and it doesn't really go bad. So that is a wonderful thing to have around. I won't go into too much detail about that unless we have time at the end and unless we have questions about that. So back to apple picking. So I picked my apples on Friday. I've canned about maybe a half a bushel. I've at least turned into applesauce on the stove over here already. So there are a couple ways to go about doing this. I've washed my apples, so now the next step would be to peel them. So I've got them right here. So peeling my apples. So there's a couple ways to go about making applesauce. Most of the time I take my apples, well, let me step back a little bit. So there's a couple ways to peel them before we even make it into sauce. There's a couple ways to peel them. So the first way is to get a vegetable peeler. I like this one. It's nice and sharp, and it cuts really nice. I had an apple peeler. I think I had it for a year or two, and it was a pain. I couldn't get it to work for me. So I got rid of it, and I just peel with an apple peeler. So you can definitely, or with a vegetable peeler, you could definitely use an apple peeler. One of those, they hook up to the side of your counter, and you kind of turn your apple into the blade so that it peels your skin off just like this. But it's just a personal preference. I don't mind doing it with my hands. So that's how I do it. So then I use my apple core. You could also just use a knife and cut the apple with a knife. That's perfectly fine too. But I use my apple core just because it's easy and I can do everything in just one step. And then I'm putting all of my cut apples into this pot right here. So as you know, apples, after you cut them, they brown. That's totally fine. That's just the skin mixing with the oxygen in the air, and it turns the skin brown. Nothing's wrong. We're going to cook it down anyway, so it's going to turn a brownish color anyway. So we're not going to worry about that. Don't freak out about that. It's going to be okay. So there, I just cut my apple up instead of using apple core. It's just less steps using this apple core. So I do that until this is all filled up. So this is where I was going to say there's a couple ways to do this. You can take your apples and cook them on the stove in a pot just like this, and cook it down until it is kind of applesauce-y. So this is what I have cooking on the stove. As I cooked, here we go. It's so yummy. As I cooked or cut up my apples, I just put it into this big pot and just kept cooking it down. So then I take an immersion blender over here. I like to use one of these. You can use a blender. Just pour this applesauce into your regular blender or a food processor. It'll do the same thing. Process it as much or as little as you want, depending on how chunky you like your applesauce. And then we're ready to ladle it into the hot jars. So I'm gonna set that over there. The second option, if you didn't want to just do it on the stove like that, last year I remember my daughter started pre-K and it was crazy in the fall around here. So I would just cut up apples a couple times a day and toss them in a couple crock pots that I had going throughout the day. And whenever I had time, that's when I ladled it into a hot jar, and canned it whenever I had the chance. So that's another way to do it. One thing I did find out about that is that your applesauce cooks down a whole lot more and it'll turn a darker color. So I have a couple for comparison here. There's not really a taste difference, but this one was cooked in the crock pot last year, and this one was not cooked in the crock pot. It was just cooked down on my stove. So that's kind of the difference. You can do it either way, whatever's more convenient. Crock pot's super convenient. I bought a extra crock pot last year on Facebook Marketplace for like $5 so that I could have 2 full-size crock pots going at the same time, so I could get more of my jars or more applesauce canned without having to worry too much about it or spend too much time on it. There's certain things that you can, like tomatoes, that take the whole day and it's a huge ordeal. Applesauce doesn't have to be that way. Applesauce is pretty easy. So once we cook down our apples, you can't really mess it up. Just peel, core, and cook the apples. I don't add any sugar. They're already super sweet to begin with. I should go back and talk about what kinds of apples. You can, a lot of times I like to go to the orchards. Before I found the lady that I have gone to for the last few years, I would go to local orchards and just buy seconds quality apples by the half bushel. That's substantially less expensive, and you're going to get a mixture of apples. Your applesauce is going to have, it's going to taste so much better with a mixture of apples instead of just one type. Then you're mixing the sweet and the tart apples and everything together. So it's a little more dynamic than just a single type of apple. Single type of apple would also cost you a little bit more money, if that matters, at the orchard. All you need is seconds quality, really. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit bruised. You're just going to cook them up anyway and turn them into delicious applesauce. So use any type of apple when you do this. So we will want to sterilize our canning jars. So I do have my canning jars for years, and I was actually taught by my grandparents and by my mom to sterilize jars in the water bath canner as you're warming it up. So I have my water bath canner warming up or on the stove right here. But since I've become an adult and learned my own things for canning, or did my own research, I have all of my jars inside my oven right here. I have the oven set for 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll sterilize them just by being in the oven for 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, then you can start canning them. Other ways to sterilize jars: in the water bath canner, in the oven, you can toss them in the dishwasher and they will come out steamy hot. So when I have my jars in storage in the basement and then I bring them up after the winter and I'm ready to can in the summertime, I might just toss them in the dishwasher to quick wash them off and also to sterilize them. So those are some things. The reason why we sterilize, to get them nice and clean. You have food stored in them, so it has to be free from any kind of dirt or dust or anything. It's going to be sitting in there until you open up your jar. And to prevent from botulism, which is just contaminants. If you don't follow rules correctly when you're canning, you may hear of botulism, just the food spoiling and eating spoiled food. So that said, it's important to follow USDA approved canning recipes. So I have my Blue Book of Canning. It's loved. So I have my Blue Book of Canning A lot of these recipes I just have memorized already. I know certain things like fruits are fine. You don't have to worry so much about botulism with fruits because they contain a high amount of sugar. Jams, you're adding sugar, so they're fine. Tomatoes are borderline, so that's why when you can tomatoes, you add a little bit of lemon juice to add that acidity to it, and that makes it okay for a water bath canner. For certain things that I can, like beans that are not pickled, or like bonzo beans or black beans, things like that, vegetable broth, things with low acidity levels, I use my pressure canner. So I'm not going to do any pressure canning today or talk about that too much, but you do want to know that higher acidic foods are okay in a water bath canner, and that's what we're using today. So that this is my water bath canner right here. This one's full of water. So this is a water bath canner right here. So it has a rack on the inside where you set your jars. So I filled my water bath canner up to the top with water. Here's the rack. This is where you put all of your jars of applesauce when they're ready to go in. Those, I've seen the water bath canners a lot of times on Facebook Marketplace. I always look secondhand first, just because that's what I believe in. So a lot of times people are getting rid of water bath canners that way. So I would definitely look secondhand. Otherwise, online, Meijer sells them. I'm not sure if they sell them right now, but or if they're in stock right now, but they do sell them. So I've got, let me see, applesauce here. So you can make these, well, you can make this with apples or pears. I'm actually going to make it with pears in a couple weeks when my pears firm up. So this is a little side note. That applesauce that I have cooking over there, I've been taking little bowls of it. Oh, here's one actually. It makes a delicious snack. I just toss some cinnamon sugar on top of it, and that makes for a really good dessert. This one doesn't have any sugar on it at all, so I think it just has straight cinnamon, so it's just apples and cinnamon cooked. That makes for a really good snack. So that's keep you full while you're canning. Yep. So once all of our apples are cut and this is all filled, like my pot over there, then you'll probably want to add a little bit of water, and so that you can stir everything down. And then it's just on low heat right now. It's about cooked down as much as it'll cook down, more or less, until I use the immersion blender and blend the rest. Blend it smooth. I like a smoother applesauce and less of a chunky, but that's totally up to you. Let me see if I can get see any comments here. Let me see if okay. Oops. I've got the comments, or I've got the stream up here. So if you're on Facebook and you have any questions, go ahead and ask away, because I can see them now, I think. We were having some technical issues earlier, so who knows. Let's blend this so I can show you how this turns into a sauce. Is there anyone out there that does can already, and what are your favorite things to can? It's so delicious. So I've got to plug this in. This might be a little bit loud for a second. Oops. Oh my gosh. Is this broken? This would just be my luck for the day. Oh, here we go. Okay. So it's still kind of chunky. That's fine for today's purposes. It's still so delicious. Oh, there's still more apples down there. One thing I did forget to say. I have this strainer right here. If you do cook them with the peels still on, like in the crock pot or in here, you can run it through this strainer. And the strainer has, here we go, this, and you put it in here with a bowl underneath, and it'll remove all of the skins for you. So my kids won't eat applesauce with the skins on them, so this was another $5 marketplace find that has been a lifesaver for so many things. So here's my applesauce. I will take a jar. Woo! Hot from the oven. And I use a funnel. So here's a jar funnel that you can get in any canning kit from the store. I use this so often that I bought a second one because I use it for everything. So then I'll just take the applesauce, and that helps me fill the jar without making a humongous mess. So there we go. It's all in there. There's that. I'm going to use this towel because it was so hot. So tamping it will be just fine. This is probably a little bit excessive, but you don't want any air bubbles inside your jar because that will encourage, that might build up when it's in the water bath canner, and it might explode when it's in the canner. So here is this. Make sure your lid is, or your rim is dry. And then make sure your rim is clean here. Put it on and then seal it with a band. So there's my applesauce. A little bit chunky, but it's okay. Ready to go in the water bath canner. So there it is. I set it right here on the rack. I can fill up the rest. So once all of these are filled up, it's nice to sometimes, that's why I have 2 water bath canners, because sometimes I like to have both of them going. But it's nice to have Nice to have 2 stock pots also, or a stock pot and a crock pot, or 2 crock pots, whatever. It's nice to have multiple going, especially if you do bigger batches like I do. Because then it gets done a whole lot faster, and canning is one of those things where it starts off slow, but then once you are in the rhythm and everything's hot like it needs to be, and ready to go, then you just then it's speedy. So this is you can see air bubbles in there. So this is with pressure canning, you're usually just filling cold jars with whatever. So beans, green beans, you just fill the jars with beans and add water. Nothing needs to be hot. With water bath canning, everything is hot. Your food is hot, your jars are hot, and you're sticking it in a hot water bath and then letting it process for 10 minutes. So I fill these up, put it inside my water bath, pick that up. Once that starts boiling, then that's when I start the time. So that's when it needs to process for 10 minutes. So that's when I start the 10 minutes when it starts boiling. I'm not always super exact. Most of the time, just to be safe, I let it process for longer. Sometimes I forget about it and it processes longer. It's fine. You know when it's done. You know when it's processed when you take your jars out of the canner and they pop. So that's the beautiful symphony that happens after you can. You'll take them all out of the water bath canner. Make sure you invest in some canning tongs. Yeah, I thought I lost them. Here they are. So this comes in the same kit that you can buy this with. So this is so that you can lift your jars out of your water bath canner. So this is super important. My mom always just grabbed them with her hands, but my mom was kind of immune to heat, so she had superhuman powers like that. So when you take these out of the water bath canner, they'll all ping. So that means that the top is secured. So if you saw earlier, I did store these with the band on them. That's not recommended. I do loosen them before I store them just to make sure it's on there secure. It's just I'm usually canning so much that I just skip that step. But I do loosen the bands. The reason why you don't want to store with the bands on there tight is because it can create a false seal. So where you think that your jar is sealed, but it's really not. So your food is going to go bad, and you have the possibility of consuming some food that is not good, that has gone bad. So that's why you don't store with the bands on. At least loosen them up. I just took the band off of this, but it's definitely on there. Most of the time, I break nails trying to take the lids off of my jars. So every once in a while with the tomato jar, it doesn't secure all the way, but you can definitely tell with tomatoes. So that's it. Once it's processed in there for 10 minutes, usually I load that up. It fits 9 pint-sized jars, I think. Once that's done, I'll take them all out and set them on the counter here, and then let them cool down overnight, and then move them downstairs to my storage. I have all my canning storage downstairs just because I do so much canning that is the biggest, coolest, dark place that I can store my stuff. But you can definitely move whatever you can to the pantry. You don't have to can a bunch like I do. You can just get a peck of apples, or just you could just can one jar if you wanted to. That's totally fine. My mother-in-law, throughout the summer, she cans just 1 or 2 jars of tomatoes at a time. Just whenever her garden produces tomatoes, she picks them and cans them. So you do whatever works for you. And you might, maybe you're canning at a larger scale than I am. Maybe you have 2 water baths and you're canning for days in a row. I know of people like that too. I can devote a max of like 10 hours a day straight to canning. That's usually tomatoes. And yeah. So I don't see any comments here. Oops. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. But that is a quick overview of canning, and specifically applesauce canning, since apples are in season right now. Apples and pears. I think that's it. A lot of, I don't know, is zucchini still happening? Maybe that's over with. I still have zucchini. I actually made, this is kind of a side note, but relevant because it tastes like apples, with some leftover, or some very big zucchini that I had from friends. A friend gave me a recipe for a zucchini cobbler, and you cube up zucchini and you add sugar, water, and cinnamon and nutmeg to it, and you bake it just like we did here with the applesauce. And then you make a crust. So I made a vegan gluten-free crust because that's the diet that I follow. And it tastes like, you put it all together and it tastes like applesauce, or apple pie. I think I have one here. It's crazy. Yeah, I do. The very last one. Excuse me while I dig in my fridge. So here, this is the zucchini cobbler. So kind of crazy. It's delicious and oozing down the side, but really interesting. If you get a chance to make it with any leftover squash that you might have hanging around, or any squash that you choose, that if you buy at the store. I was pleasantly surprised because I don't like zucchini, but I love an apple pie, and they have the same texture: cooked zucchini and cooked apples. So it makes so much sense. You add lemon juice. That was the key. I think it was just Google zucchini cobbler. I think it was an All Recipes recipe. But the zucchini cobbler was super delicious. So that's a little side note if you're aching for a apple pie in the middle of summer, or end of summer, or now, whenever. So yeah, I don't see any comments, but keep them coming because I can respond to the comments, write out the comments when we're done here. You can also contact me if you have any other questions that I didn't cover at Christina, that's CHRISTINA, at mylovelymuse.com, and I'm happy to help you. Any canning questions, any sustainability questions, I'm happy to help. They're passions of mine and things I've been practicing for years, and I've been canning my whole life. So. Or if you have any tips for me, because I'm always learning also. So I'd appreciate that also. But since I don't have any questions, I'm going to, or since I don't see any questions, I'm going to pass this on to Marie and see if, Marie, do you see anything on your end?
No, I don't. But maybe people will, when they watch this later. So
I
Great.
hope
Thank you
so.
so much. That was really fascinating. And I hope that everyone gives canning a try. Thanks a
You
lot,
too.
Christina.
You're
Have a
welcome.
great night.
You
Bye,
too.
everyone.